Namaste, everybody. Welcome to our January month Chrysalis Anthropological Forum meet. I welcome all the guests and all the Chrysalians who are there today. I'm sure you had a great send-off party for 2020, the last New Year's Eve. और send-off तो बनता था because इतना हंगामा जो किया 2020 ने. So we also had a great, gap for almost around 10 months. And tomorrow, good news to share with all of you that we are starting the first open program from our side after almost around 10 months. So tomorrow I'm taking a batch on leadership for next 2 days. So looking forward to it tomorrow. On the same note, एक sad news है आप सबके लिए. In the morning, I came to know of the passing away of Mr. Mangesh Kale of Pari, and a very sad news because it was sudden and unfortunate. And जैसी मुझे news मालूम पड़ी तो my mind went back to our CF meet जहाँ पर वो आए थे as a guest speaker, and it was one of the most awesome evenings we have had when he was there. जो उन्होंने sharing करी थी उस पे जो questions आए थे, they were phenomenal. And the more I thought about it, the more I sensed that क्या उनको premonition था कि did he think that it would happen? Because just last month we got the news that Pari was bought over by Wipro. तो एक होता ना कि कहीं ना कहीं एक जहन में एक बात होती है कि मैंने ये बिल्ड किया, मैंने इतने सालों से इतनी मेहनत से ये एक बनाया है, and this should go to somebody who's responsible, who's capable of handling it, of taking it forward, of making it even bigger than what I've created. And I think somewhere I feel वो thought कहीं ना कहीं रहा होगा, and that's how just 1 month before he left, Wipro bought over Pari. And on a second note, on same side, कि देखिए जाना तो सभी ने है, चाहे मैं हूँ आप हो, जाना सभी ने है, but the question is what we leave behind. And look at the legacy which he has left behind. We're talking about Pari, we're talking about a company, we're talking about a legend in automation. We're talking about a company which not only this country but the world also talks about. So हम भी इस सफर में हैं, and our journey is also going to come to an end. It's a matter of time. So I think his life is a big message for all of us that once this journey comes to an end, what is that thing which you're going to leave behind? What legacy are you going to leave behind? So our prayers to his family and all people who look up to him, adore him, and God give them strength to handle this loss which has happened. Let's move on to our meet today. We have with us some amazing speakers. We have Mr. Srinivasan here. I will ask Rajesh to do the honors. Just before we go into welcoming and inviting Mr. Srinivasan, just want to share an insight from my side that we have been coming here for the last so many years on CF Meet, now online. Before that, we were offline. We have had happy minds for all of you. Your family comes, you are there with your children. तो ये सब जितनी बार आप लोग आते हो और जितनी बार मैं आप लोग को देखता हूँ इधर, तो एक I always miss out on sharing this beautiful insight with all of you, that you all coming for CF meets, you all coming for HMs or Happy Minds is a beautiful habit which you're building, and that habit is to pay attention or to focus or to make a choice for what is important in life. याद है हमने बैच में किया था the concept of what is urgent and what is important. Just to share with you, I think here we are. Vidisha, are we able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
So if you remember, I'll just take you through this beautiful understanding that we spoke about two aspects of our life, that things around us will be in the category of important or they will be in the category of urgent. So coming for CF meets, coming for or going for any of the training programs, or you sitting and you planning things, you strategizing, they all fall in the category of important. And of course, there are things which are urgent in life. The difference between both is that urgent things, they always act on us. We don't have to make a choice there. The urgent things make choice for us. For example, there's a crisis in the office. Maybe there's a customer who is an irate customer. Maybe there's a challenge in terms of some GST filing, something which is a crisis, and the crisis will draw itself you to it. So that's what urgency is all about. Important is where you have to take a call. जहां आपको जाना पड़ेगा, आपको एक्शन लेना पड़ेगा. And that's where majority of us, we fail, because we are driven more by urgency than we take a choice towards the important side. So coming for CF meet is not urgent. किसी ने आपके माथे पे बंदूक नहीं रखी है कि आपको CF meet में आना है. It's something which is important, and you have taken a call that I should be there. So if you remember this, we had spoken about these 4 quadrants there. So something which is important but not urgent, like the CF meet, like the planning, like strategizing, taking care of your health. We're talking about important and urgent, which is a crisis, some deadlines, whether it be business, whether it be personal, things which are urgent but not important, which you can't avoid, maybe in a phone call, maybe a visitor at your doorstep who's there, urgent but not important. And of course, things which are not urgent and not important at all, like let me not talk about it, gossiping and things like that. अच्छा, ये जो दो quadrants हैं जिसमें important है और नीचे वाले में जहां urgent और important कुछ भी नहीं है, ये दो areas में हमारे पास choice making होता है. We can make a choice to go here or we can make a choice to go here. Urgent में we don't have a choice much. The things act on us. So by coming to CF meets, we are knowingly, unknowingly, we are putting ourselves into a habit of moving towards the important side. And if this habit is built in us, ये consciously कहीं ना कहीं creep होगा in many other areas of importance. For example, culture building in an organization is so important, but there's no urgency for it. ये आज ही बनाना है culture, एक अच्छा culture होना चाहिए. There is no urgency for it. There is no final date for it. There's no deadline for it. But it is important, and that's why many organizations, they fail on building a culture because कोई urgency नहीं है. And that's what I want to start off with. And I want to leave you all with that thought process before Mr. Srinivasan comes and takes over, that one of the most beautiful ways by which we can build culture is to go through our value system. And we also have a value system for CF. Let me just revise it for all of you. How does a culture get formed? One of the most powerful ways is to have certain values, to have a very powerful purpose. So at CF, we have a purpose, and the purpose says that we will continuously experience the joy of building better businesses, thereby leading to inclusive growth. So the whole idea is to experience the joy of building a business. It's not about कि मर मर के business बना रहे हैं. We have given up on our health. We have given up on our all the other aspects of our life. कि रिश्ते छूट गए, बच्चे बड़े हो गए, health toss पे गया, and then we have made a business we can talk about. What's the point of building a business when you have paid such a premium for it? So the idea is experience the joy of building a better business, and it's all about leading to inclusive growth. So can we have growth for everybody? That's the purpose which we are living by in Chrysalis Entrepreneur Forum. And of course, we have the values with us, 4 very powerful values. Success transfer, that whatever success we experience, we will transfer it to our fellow entrepreneurs, fellow members. We are talking about no postponement of life, and so many of us have taken up to this value that we will not postpone our life. I see so many of you, even last few months, I've seen so many of you going for cycling. We have, Abhay Fatangre, he cycled from here to Hampi and he came back. We have a few more cycling to, I think, to Panipat side. And I did paragliding last month. So the idea is not to postpone life and then live life the way we should. And third is, of course, you have an abundance mindset. Let's not live our life. Let's not approach things with a scarcity mindset. If we can have abundance in a thought process, in our actions, abundance will happen in our life. That's for sure. And the fourth core value is implementation. Whatever we learn, let it be less, but let us focus on implementing it. Let us not become full of knowledge. Let us be people of wisdom, and wisdom can only happen if we implement certain things in life. So with these core values, we said, let's chase our vision. And we have a very demanding, challenging, daunting vision with us in front of us. And we say that we intend to make a contribution of 2% to the GDP growth of India by 2025. And that's what we look forward to. एक aspiration है, होगा नहीं होगा अलग बात है, but at least we are happy that we can think in this direction. And somewhere, in some way, some small way, big way, we should be able to contribute to this wonderful country of ours. And that's what we aspire for. So with this sharing of the values and the purpose and the vision of the forum, I leave it to you that with this understanding that building the culture of an organization is important. It is not urgent. It's only when we act on it, then things will happen. I now invite Rajesh. Would you do the honors to introduce our chief guest and chief speaker for the day, Mr. Srinivasan, and take it forward from here.
Namaste.
Namaste, Rajesh.
It's actually, as I wrote on the group, I am actually thrilled to have Mr. Srinivasan on this particular forum. I am lucky to listen to him in many conferences, in many vision conclaves, and I have seen his energy level. I have seen how he takes people to the task with, of course, certain objectives and get the things done. I mean, I would like, this is a great honor, in fact, not only for me, but our entire forum that Mr. Srinivasan he has agreed to address our CF meet. So just to have short introduction of Mr. Srinivasan, Mr. Udupa and Mr. Mukund. Mr. Srinivasan, he has set up Vidya, which is again known as the Institute of Engineering in Bangalore. And he has built that company right from scratch after moving out from Germany back to India. And I think he is the longest serving managing director of Vidya so far. And he has been on many advisory boards, at least 20 plus companies he has been on advisory board. He has been, I have been listening to him and interacting to him as a IMTMA member. He is a guru of IMTMA. So today we are lucky to have two gurus together, Mr. R. Srinivasan and our own MG sir, along with again two sub-gurus, Mr. Udupa and Mr. Mukund. Very few forums, I think, will have this kind of privilege. Along with Mr. Srinivasan, Mr. Udupa is there, who has been accomplished HR professional, again started career with Vidya and then went on to his own HR consultancy. And Mr. Mukund, when I went through that particular book, I think I haven't met both of them personally, but I can see that he is a quite multifaceted personality, handling various functions of different companies, including, of course, starting career with Vidya and then CEO of a company like world-class company like Insphinx. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, sir. And I also, I was always afraid of reaching out to Mr. Srinivasan, though he is quite approachable, but his book, Above and Beyond, actually, I grabbed that particular opportunity to write to him because that book has bridged the gap. We have read many management books which are written by some foreign authors, but I think if there is a gap in Indian, management literature, I think this book has filled that particular gap. I feel that every entrepreneur should have this particular this particular book in his library. It's so powerful book. So, and another best part of this particular book, that book itself starts with a sentence that Rajesh was a gold medalist from Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai. So that's another good part of it. So welcome, Mr. Srinivasan, Mr. Udupa, and Mr. Mukund to this particular forum. And with this my small introduction, I leave it to you to address our forum. Thank you very much.
You're unmuted. Can you unmute us? Yeah, it started. Yeah. Good evening. I hope I'm audible. Good evening, members of this Chrysalis Enterprise Forum. I'm really thrilled to talk to all of you this evening. And thank you very much, Rajesh, for a very generous introduction and introducing also my two co-authors who are Udupa and Mukund, who are here with me this evening. It is indeed a pleasure to talk to all of you, and hopefully we'll have a nice interaction after my brief introductory talk. I hope to sort of talk to you for about 35 to 40 minutes, and I'll come to the screen. Can you put this on, please?
Yeah, it's on.
It's not shared.
It's shared on. Yeah.
I hope you can see our screen. Is
Yes,
on
sir.
full screen mode? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I am also very happy to see that your values, the purpose, what Mr. Manish sort of mentioned right at the beginning of these things, also very much vibes with whatever we are going to talk, whatever we written in the book, and whatever we are going to talk today. You see, being a Chrysalian is just, can you click the next one? Yeah. Is not just being successful, and we'll talk about success as we go along, what success really is, but I think it's much more than that. It is about pursuing your passion and realizing your own dreams. I think that is what is being a successful entrepreneur. And I see in one of your vision that you want to make a significant contribution to the GDP of this country, which is really a very nice things to hear, because very rarely you talk about small enterprises, a group of them having a vision to make an impact at the country level. I think this is excellent, and I'm very encouraged to share with you whatever I'm going to talk about what you've written in our book, and I'm sure it will vibe with all of you. Today we are passing through very challenging times, It's very challenging times, and I only hope that our discussions will enable us to sort of sift out all our doubts and give us some clear directions and plans to implement. And implementation is also one of your values, which is very excellent, very nice to know. We are going through a very massive disruption in many areas. For example, right from the business model, there is a disruption. New business models which are completely different from the brick and mortar what we are used to in our engineering industries is emerging. There are business models like the Uber or the Airbnb or even Amazon or whatever, where merely on a platform they are able to connect the customer and the supplier and create an enormous amount of value. They are absolutely asset light, and but they are able to add value to both ends. They are able to deliver value to the customers, and they at the same time create value to their own suppliers. I think the other big thing which is happening around us, which you cannot miss, is the technological revolution, which are causing severe challenges. There have been all around in multi-dimensional technology is making a huge impact. One of the easiest things for us to see is the impact of the electric vehicles, the emerging electric vehicle revolution, and the impact it's likely are going to have on the entire automobile industry and many of the small-scale manufacturing industries in our country, because 50% of most of them are possibly engaged, even in Pune, are engaged with some auto industry or the other. The other technological change which is causing an impact is the digitization. It is giving us an opportunity to completely reorganize, and the way in which we can do business, they can all dramatically change if only we're able to take digitization and leverage it. Another one threatening us on the horizon is the artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think this is also going to make a severe impact on the way in which we are going to carry on the business in the years ahead. The other major disruption is caused by the trade war between USA and China has had a very severe impact, and the major MNCs in the world are relooking. Many of them have put all the eggs in their basket in China, and they are making, and now they are realizing that there's a severe disruption to the global supply chain, and that is what is indeed happening, and there are a number of fallouts out of that. But more importantly and significantly, the customer expectations are changing dramatically. First and the foremost is that the customers today are just not satisfied with the product or a service, as the case may be. They want a complete solution, and not just a solution, that also would like to have an experience of dealing with an organization which is pleasant. They don't want to deal with, we have the excellent product, but if their experience of dealing with the organization is not pleasant, they are not happy at all. So there's a tremendous amount of value which the present generation and the present customers are placing on how they do the business and what experience they can get out of it. On top of all this, the pandemic has accentuated the problem really. It has put the world upside on its head, and it has made us rethink about the way in which we work and live. I think all of us have learned to do that. We have learned to become technically savvy. We are able to connect on the network, and we imagine that we could not imagine, let us say, a year ago, how we could work from homes. But today that has become more or less a routine. And it is also focusing us on rethink on our priorities. Earlier we were perhaps ignoring the human side of it, and today that has come to the fore, and it is impacting the way we look at human lives and livelihoods. Lives are becoming more important than livelihood. And the casual worker who was there either in the shop floor or in a construction site, in fear, he has walked away. Let us say maybe about 8 or 10 months ago, and that has completely brought various industries on their knees and disrupted our operations. So let us now for a moment go back to see what a successful company is. You know, we are talking about success also as one of your main things, what Manish mentioned in the introductory remarks. You see, for the last 70 years, in our opinion, we have been living, the businesses have been living by what is called the Milton Friedman dictum. You know, it was mainly stated in the 1970s. Friedman stated that the main purpose of the business is to create value for the shareholders. That means profit overrode everything else. And this has been driving all businesses and all operations around the world, and so also here in our country. This unmitigated pursuit or single-minded focus on profits and top line and bottom line has had any number of unintended consequences. Shift more. First of all, we have created a very, very unequal society. The gap between the rich and the poor has widened in the last 10, 20 years. This gap has widened so much, and every year we are adding much more billionaires to the list, and there is a race among saying who is the richest person in the world, but we are leaving behind millions and millions of people in abject want and distress. So this is a very unequal society our way of operation has created over the years. The second and the other unmissable consequence is that we have done a serious damage to the planet. There has been overall, all-round severe damage to the planet, deforestation and whatever, and global warming is a thing which all of us cannot, we are all experiencing with the unnatural floods and rains and harsh winters, etc. And so there is and in people like in Delhi and Beijing and other big cities are finding it difficult even to get fresh air to breathe. That is what we have made out of this planet, and we have to really rethink of how we are going to correct that. So all in all, we are living in what is known as the VUCA world today. You know, it is a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. It's really complex. We really do not know what is going to happen next week, leave alone next year. So that's what the situation we are in. But in this VUCA world, will it only cause disruptions as we talked about, or are there going to be new opportunities for us to grab? This is what we need to look at and understand. Many things are happening around us in the industry as well. As I said, the EV industry, the electric vehicles are disrupting the auto industry. And you talked about the party and automation. The automations are there, getting into a very big way. Robotics is getting in. Robots are there. The country today imports more than 10,000 robots every year today in India. And then we have these other dimensions of the Internet of Things impacting our operations and working of the shop floors and our day-to-day lives, and the Industry 4.0, which wants to step up the entire industry to the next level. There is also the global corporations are now, as you mentioned earlier, are wanting to shift out of China, and they are adopting a China Plus One strategy. And so huge investments are flowing into this country and into the manufacturing space. At the same time, there is a call for local for global. We find that today, for example, there is a hesitancy. It has been promoted that we should not buy Chinese products and we have to go for local products. Not only that, the government is very keen that we should have local products should be promoted. As a matter of fact, every district they are identifying a local product which needs to be promoted, supported, and even exported. Now the question there is, all these changes now, are we able to decipher and understand what is happening? What is the customer expecting? What is his demand? What are the changes we need to make in the organization? Amidst all this, the Prime Minister has given a clarion call. I think the Atmanirbhar Bharat is one thing which is now on the minds and lips of many, many Indians. And a huge amount of incentives have been provided under this scheme to boost manufacturing in this country. It started with the electronic industries, and India hopes to become one of the biggest exporters of cellular phones, mobile phones by the year 2025, not far away, just hardly 4 years from now. Huge incentives are being given. So therefore, many, many opportunities are waiting to be there to be grabbed, but are we ready? Are we ready? I think that is the question. So when we talk about all these things, you as entrepreneurs with a limited mindset, I think you could be in some sort of a very difficult situation in the sense that you may feel alone, completely left alone, maybe having to fight all these battles all alone by yourself, having to fend for yourself. and your people in your own setups are not in a position to support you. And sometimes you may feel that this is perhaps one of the most challenging times we have faced in our own life. So the question really is the team of people who are working with you, are they really capable to help you and make the needed changes? Are they skilled enough? Do they have the right skills to address the challenges and what is required for the future? And more importantly, are they empowered enough to take on your load and also help you lead the organization into the future? Should we not develop more leaders in the organization? Leaders in the sense it's not just the one man at the top, but also the people at the various levels who have a certain amount of tasks to execute and have some people to manage. Should they not be able to take ownership and take responsibility for their actions and outcomes? They should be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and take on more leadership roles and to share the responsibility, as it were. They should be able to share your vision. They should be able to share your passion and actually support you and help you achieve your dreams. Can we individually and collectively become Atmanirbhar? I think that's the real issue this is coming out of this. So I will see that we see a lot of opportunities on the one hand, but we are unable to reach out and grasp them. So we seem to be hitting a glass wall, the proverbial glass ceiling, as it were. We're able to see the opportunities, but we are not able to really exploit them. So I think it is necessary for us to turn this glass wall into a mirror, and we have to start look inward, and we have to reflect on what are the changes we need to make in our own, the way in which we work, run our businesses, and the way in which we live our own individual lives. The earlier strategies which got us here so far are no longer good enough. I think we need to find a new set of approaches, and success depends very much on our ability to understand the customer expectations and satisfy those customer expectations. Therefore, there is a need for us to reinvent, reimagine, and recreate businesses, as it were. It cannot, in my opinion, done by the single individual, the entrepreneur, by you say alone. It needs, and I believe that many of you might be following a command and control type of operation, but most of the things are centralized in your hands and in your office. I think we would need the support of the entire team of people who are there in the organization to stand behind you, work shoulder to shoulder with you, and take the organization forward. Now, if you look at what is happening in the outside world today, the young people who are coming out after their education, training, and whatever, they join an organization, but very soon they find that they are not happy and they change. You know that the rotational rate is very, very high. Particularly the people at higher, the educated people, the graduate level engineers and the management graduates and others, they change their jobs ever so often. 6 months, 12 months, they are out of their jobs, and they find that in the first 5 years, they have rotated 3 or 4 jobs. They are completely changing their jobs and they're unstable. This makes the organizations unstable, and we are not able to attract and retain talent. And it is all the more difficult in the manufacturing sector to get the right type of people and the right type of talent and to retain them on top of it. So there is, what is happening there? If you look at the companies, some of the bigger companies, and more so in the service sector, the companies are offering swanky offices and generous pay packages and various other benefits. And the individuals initially, when they start the career, they are looking out for their own, maximizing their own income. And once they mature a little bit, they want something more, and they want some more meaning in their own lives. And there is a big shift. Earlier, at least in my days, when people joined work, it was a lifetime employment. Once they joined the company, they never used to leave it, and the companies could depend on them, and whatever made out of them was up to the leadership and the management. But this is where we find today that we are not able to attract and retain people, and there is a big churn happening there out in the market. Why does this happen? I think this comes because there is a dichotomy in the interests. The companies want to maximize their profits, and they want to sort of increase their shareholder value, market cap or market share or whatever. And the people, on the other hand, initially, as I mentioned, they were looking for a big purse. But the fact of the matter is that I pay, you perform type of a approach or a mindset, it does not work anymore. So the result, what happens is the people after some stage continue on a job, but they are less engaged, and they are getting frustrated, and they just don't know what to do with their own lives. So now let us look at an organization. What happens to an organization? Where does it start? How does it evolve? And what are the issues connected with the organization as a whole? Maybe you as an entrepreneur originally had an idea and you started off with an idea. The initial attempt is to test and prove, yes, this idea is workable. I think that is the initial starting phase. Try out and test market and try and see if this idea works. And once that is reasonably successful, then you get on to the second phase. You want to stabilize your business. You want to add on customers. You want to add some more, little more people. And then you grow. And then you want to increase your sales and revenue. And you try to stabilize the entire business. Then you get into what we would like to call as a growth. You want to become a profitable organization. The entrepreneur's attention gets more focused on the operations, to strengthen the base on which the business rests, focuses on the customer, product development, costs, supply chain, profitability, etc. What I mean to say is that the focus is primarily on the business numbers and limited to business goals and growth. People are recruited, some people leave, some people come, some people stay. There's hardly any time to understand what the people want and address those issues. I think you might have experienced this in your own growth so far. And this is what we call the third or the growth phase. Many companies come here and they get into some sort of a tough situation. Soon they hit a roadblock because he finds it difficult to get the capable and engaged people. He finds that he's not able to attract and get enough capable people, nor is he able to get the engagement from the people who are working within the organizations. We are not able to motivate the people and keep them engaged. Better salaries and perks are offered, some incentive offers. They work for a certain amount of time, but that is not really a sustainable way in which the business can grow. So some attempt is made to recruit people, some experienced people from outside, but then you find that the people coming from outside are not able to fit into the culture what you have, the way in which the things get done in the organization, and that brings with it its own set of problems. You want the people to take responsibility, but the people are unwilling or perhaps unable to take the responsibility. So the people competence and other issues gain importance, and there are some efforts made to train those people and build their capabilities, but by and large these efforts turn out to be less successful. Perhaps many of you are in this phase and find it difficult because the growth depends again on the capability and the ability of the organization to deliver, and there we seem to have certain amount of constraint. However, in this scenario, some organizations are broken out of this phase. They succeed in putting together some good practices. They look at a vision, try to get alignment into the people. They are able to identify some strategies, deliver better products and services to the customer, and they look at the processes. They want to look at better quality. They also try to give the people a role clarity. They give them some very clear performance goals, and the CEO tries to improvement activities. Some of them latch on to the excellence frameworks, be it Baldrige or be it Deming or be it the CIA Exim. That gives you a framework on which the organization looks at processes and makes sure that they are able to deliver better value and reliable value in a sustainable manner to the customer. The CEO wants to grow and wants to become one of the top contributor or have the highest market share. But the business gets into a phase where you very much depend on the growth and the recession of the outside economy, and you ebb and tide with the economy. This is perhaps the excellent phase, but many customer companies, even after coming into the excellent phase or even getting an award from many of these Deming companies or CII or Baldrige, sooner or later find that they tend to stagnate. Why? Because very soon the target setting, improvement planning, and all these activities becomes routine. The people's interest peters out, and for that the Western system, mostly the Americans, come and suggest that we should bring in new initiatives. Very often they bring in this or bring in that initiative, but it becomes more or less a flavor of the month and is really not sustainable. If you really try to analyze why this is happening, there is one reason in our view, that the people get tired of working merely to improve the top and the bottom line. Higher performance pay incentives does not get you full engagement. It is somehow, this old Milton Friedman thing I talked about, his doctrine about merely working our business, the role is only to increase the profit, does not seem to work anymore. And so therefore the question is arising, and there's a more and more discussion around it, is this doctrine dead? And we have to look for something above and beyond profits to keep the interests of the people alive. Most organizations are stuck here and stagnate. This is where the situation is. Now, if we look at it in this situation, there are some organizations which really stand out and catch our attention, and we admire them. One of the very big and the oldest organizations in the country, the Tatas, I think they always stand out in the way in which I think most of you know that the Tatas, when they were founded, made the steel company in Jamshedpur about 120 years ago. It was primarily the objective of not to make a profit, but to make the country strong. I am happy to see that you have such a purpose in your own vision statement for the CEO Forum. That is very, very encouraging. So the purpose is very, very important, that we are able to contribute, go beyond our own immediate gains of top profits or the company's own return and value, but look at the contributing to the country and society as a whole. Another organization which tries to catches our imagination is Larsen & Toubro. They build some iconic projects around the world. They do some very difficult tasks. They execute it with excellence, and they fill their own people and their customers with a sense of pride. I think they're able to build that pride, and when they stand on that pride, which takes the people, they give them a certain amount of meaning. They are happy to be associated with such a project, and the people working there certainly find some meaning in this whole exercise. Let us not for one moment say that this purpose is only for large organizations. I think one of the very well-known small organization in Belgaum is Polyhedron, which is a small company. I think it's around about 100 crore or so, I guess now at this point in time. They have the purpose which says that the business is creation of wealth for the nation. They are looking at it. And similarly, I'm happy that you have one of your vision statements that you want to contribute to the nation. So if you really believe in that, then there's a certain amount of already an alignment. So in our view, there is a stage beyond excellence parameter, where the organization and the people work with a sense of purpose, with a sense of pride, and with a sense of meaning in whatever they are doing. Where I believe the leaders look at to serve a purpose, go beyond profits, and to impact the larger common good. There is also here, if you really understand, there is a spirit of service, and a certain amount of selflessness is required on part of the leader or the entrepreneur. It does not mean that the organization should be doing only charitable activity or CSR activity, but it is about keeping the common good in mind. Whenever you choose a strategy, whenever you want to do something new, or you take a day-to-day decision, it is about saying that, look here, would it result in a good to the people concerned or the society at large, not only serve the immediate needs of the organization. This, we believe, is a self-sustaining stage, and the organizations can function then seamlessly and smoothly as if it were on autopilot. Innovation and creativity keep the organization fresh and alive, and there is always a certain amount of energy and spirit within the organization. Now let us look at the people. Why are the people not engaged? I think the global surveys have shown that hardly 15% of the people are engaged. Mind you, only 15% of the people are engaged. 85% of the people working in most of our organizations are really not engaged. They come, they do their work, their body is there, their mind is there, their hands may do the work, or the minds may be engaged in some activity, but their heart is not in the job. Their heart is not in the job, and that is why it is so difficult to get them engaged and get them motivated and keep them motivated. So let us see what happens to the people. Now, what are the people's expectations actually change over time. When a young person starts his career, he at the initial stages he wants looking for what I would like to call financial safety and physical safety. He wants to take care that he works in a good and safe environment, and he also wants to have a certain amount of reasonable amount of income, assured income, so that his immediate needs are met. That is the first thing. There's a Rotary Kapada Makan issue. This is at the level 1, which happens to anybody's when he looks at his own work life. Then the employee wants to grow. He's not happy with it. Then he wants to go. Very soon he wants to grow. He wants to learn. He wants to do new things. He wants to build his capability. He wants to get trained, and he looks for guidance from his bosses, and he seeks mental stimulation and mental safety so that he feels that he's doing not just a routine work, but he wants to do something more. That is the second stage, which we call where we need some certain amount of mental safety. The third thing then what happens is that he wants to belong. He wants to have an identity. He wants to be recognized as an individual who is capable and who can contribute. He wants to be heard, and he wants to stand up and be counted. And this is what we are looking at as psychological safety. Psychological safety is where the individual person seeks an emotional connect to the organization. And once he finds a connect to the organization, he is willing to contribute and do something more than what otherwise was happening. The psychological safety releases the potential of the employees to some extent, and he is able to make a better contribution. But it does not stop here. What we are really at the final stage, what he is looking for is what we would like to call as psychic safety. Psychic safety is a situation where the individual is absolutely free of fear. There is no fear for him to do anything, to express his ideas, his views, question when something is wrong within the organization, have opportunities for him to sort of share his ideas with the top bosses and be recognized if they are worthwhile. Coming back to the recent thing which happened yesterday, the Indian cricket team is won in Gaba. Was a bunch of young, inexperienced people. But there was one characteristic among them about which was been talked about and written about so much in the last 24 hours is they were free of fear. If one is free of fear, one is able to rise well above his potential and show his caliber. And in this situation, when it happens, there is a requirement that when you carry out a lot of new things, there is bound to be some failures. So there should also be an environment where there is there should be no fear of reprimand, and the people should not be sort of chastised if they try something new and fail. They should be encouraged to operate and continue to develop and contribute without fear. I think the psychic safety is an essential element without which the organization will not be able to thrive. And the responsibility for this rests squarely with the leadership. The leadership has got to recognize in what stage the individual is, and he must be able to take them through these stages. And we'll talk about this a little later. So, but the CEO's challenges does not stop here. Today, the expectations from any organization or any entrepreneur or any business of any size is that the demands are changing. The expectations from the employees, the expectations from the customers, the expectations from society around, and more so from the government is changing. Today, the government expects, or the society expects, every identity to become a responsible corporate citizen. So organizations merely pursuing the top and the bottom line do not sustain for long. There is a very big, very useful data available in the American situation, which is let us say the mother of capitalism, the country where capitalism is flourishing. Even there, the life of a company in the S&P index is hardly about 20 years. All those chasing top and bottom line do not exist for long. That's not a very sustainable proposition. But on the contrary, if you look at the organizations which are trusted and who are there for a long time, like for example, we talked about the Tatas and the Birlas and the other organizations, they have looked far beyond merely their own profits and business results. They care. They care for people. They care for the environment. They care for the societies. They are sensitive to the problems being faced by their customers. They are sensitive to the problems being faced by the country. And for example, in sustainability or in the matters regarding the environment, they take care of the issues like whether it's consumption of water, whether it's consumption of wood or energy or pollutions coming out of their own operations. All these issues are taken care of. They go a step beyond, and they want to solve some of the problems of their customers, not just as customers, but also the society around. And they devote their energies to deliver something common good. By solving the problems of the employees and what the customers are facing, they move on to solve the problems of society, and therefore they are rising beyond profits. Then there is this other issue of values. You know, we talked about it. I'm so glad that the forum has got its own set of values. But in a business context, I think we would like to split the values into three parts. The first is the business ethics. I think everybody today is expected to follow the rule of the law, to do things properly, to abide by the law, not to pay bribes, and And of course, for larger companies, they expect proper disclosure and transparency and things like that, and also be fair and equitable in whatever they are doing. I think this is a set of values which we would like to call as business ethics. And most of the companies and most of the Western management books talks about companies around values around this only. But what we believe is critical are the basic human values. After all, we are dealing with a whole lot of people, be it our own employees, be it our suppliers, or be it our customers. But what they expect, what are the basic human values? These are values what we have learned from our own at home, from our own grandmothers or our elder teachers. It's all about honesty, integrity, respect, and care. Everybody wants to be treated as a human being with certain amount of dignity and respect. I think this is what we should recognize, whether it is a lowly guard standing at the gate or the casual labor on the shop floor pushing a trolley around moving material. We have to treat them with equal amount of dignity and respect as a human being. I think this is a fundamental requirement of basic human values we just got. If you look at the Japanese society, for example, this respect for the elders is ingrained in their system. And that is why one of the reasons is that they are able to get a better response from the people as a whole. When you talk about something in the organization, Toyota talks about quality, I think all the people are able to vibe and respond to it automatically. But then what we would like to talk about is a set of dharmic values. I believe it rises above all these issues. It is a certain amount of selflessness and a spirit of service which is required on the part of the leadership. It requires a certain amount of compassion. It requires a certain amount of empathy. When you're dealing with the people, if we do not have empathy, we deal with it. This is what happened to many organizations, where the large organizations, where the people issues are left just to the personal department, and they deal with them in a mechanical and routine manner. There is no empathy in the transaction. If a person is really in certain amount of trouble, he expects the organization to at least recognize the problem and do whatever it can to help him out. I think this is another great principle, and I think we in India have a great amount of heritage in this dimension of compassion and care. And that is what should enable organizations as well. The thought was, what has been drilled into our heads, that some of these things have no place in business. But I think we should step back and question these things, and we understand the importance of these basic human values and dharmic values which can improve their businesses. So now, how do all these things connect up? We've been talked about various things. We believe, and we have talked about it more extensively in our book, is that there are 7 pillars on which the organization rests, and to make it really impactful. One is, of course, the business paradigm of the leader. How he looks at the business, at what stage he is, whether he's in the early phase, a stabilizing phase, or a profitable phase. How he looks at the business, and accordingly, he should understand what stage he's in, and he should move one step ahead to take the organization forward. And the leadership paradigm impacts the stage in which the organization finds itself. The business status is impacted by the leadership business paradigm on the business. I think this is what all of us have talked about. All the management books talk about these things, that there is nothing new in this. But what is more important is the leader's paradigm on people. How we look at the people. We have talked about how the people expectations change with their own time, and the leader's paradigm has got to recognize this. He must take genuine care in the development of the people, and he must be willing to either train them or guide them or coach them or mentor them, as the case may be, and help them evolve to go up. Give them a certain amount of respect, give them a certain amount of emotional connect, give them psychic safety, and make him really contribute toward the benefit of the organization. Then we have these other 3 pillars, which we call the nucleus pillars, the nucleus on which the whole organization stands. It is about a larger purpose, it is about a holistic vision, and a set of values, again, which we talked about a little while ago. Moving on to the vision. Most of the organizations have a vision, but the vision, if you look at the ISO 9000 demands a vision, and so most of the organizations have a vision statement made out. It is hanging on their walls, but these are primarily centered around business objectives. Centered around business objectives or market share, customer satisfaction, or technology, bottom line, whatever. I think this is sort of a telescopic vision. It's a narrow vision. It does not give you a comprehensive vision. What we require is a comprehensive vision. The next stage, and many organizations evolve to that, is a set of what is known as a 3P vision, a vision of planet, people, and profits. It is also called as the ESG, as environment, society, and governance in the Western parlance. And so this is the next vision, which expands the narrow vision into something larger. But even that is not adequate. What we need is a larger purpose. The larger purpose which addresses a common good, where the business serves its duty and a responsibility in addressing and solving and creating certain amount of a larger good, much beyond the profits of the organization. So this all, how does it all add up? It is, as we said, for an organization to become create the right culture and to become impact. I think Manish talked about the organization culture. The organization culture, in our view, is directly influenced by three large important principles. One is the own leadership's paradigm around people. And this again rests on the leadership's own individual outlook on life, his Lebensschauung, as it were, how he looks at life, how he looks at being a little spirited in terms of service and being selfless and being a role model in guiding the people, in developing the people and taking them up in their own lives. That is one aspect. The second aspect that we talked about is the larger purpose. The larger purpose of doing a common good and deriving a comprehensive vision out of that, and that driving the organization, and both of these resting on a strong base of values, which consists not just of business ethics, but also of the people, basic human values, and also the dharmic values of a spirit of service. And all these things go towards building a culture which transforms the employees into entrepreneurs. It is a question of trying to make them feel that they are contributing something. Give them some meaning in their work, give them a sense of pride, and make them contribute to the growth and the future of the organization. I think, are we talking about all these things merely in an academic sense? Some studies have shown, and one of the Forbes studies, the Forbes India study, showed that it pays to be culturally aligned. The organization which is culturally not aligned, and an organization which is culturally aligned, there could be a difference of 4 times, be it in the revenue or be it in the EBITDA it delivers. That means being a culturally nourishing culture with a purpose and values and centered around people is not something which is esoteric. It's not academic. It is not just for a classroom discussion, but also makes economic sense. The companies can really thrive and grow, because what happens at that point of time is that the people there are really contributing, not just 15%, but hopefully a much larger percentage, maybe 60, 70, 80, 90% can contribute, and the organization really flourishes. It opens up when they're alive to the customers. You get inputs and ideas from them to expand your businesses and create new opportunities. You are able to reach out. You are ready to change as long as there's a real purpose and there's a need. The people are then willing to change. They are willing to move out, willing to exert themselves, and willing to contribute. And that's what results in a tremendous amount of sustained growth in an organization. And the organization makes an impact, rising above and beyond profits. I think that is what I have got to say for all of you. I will stop here. And this is what we have covered more in depth in our own book. But I would be happy to engage in a discussion with you on this topic. And I look forward to that. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Srinivasan. This was, I know you had to rush it up because there was so much which you wanted to share with all of us. And I'm sure your book has a lot of in-depth clarity on all the points which you have covered. A lot of questions came up in my mind, and just thought of shooting a few to you before we open it up for the entire forum there.
Most welcome.
Let me start with the last part, because it stays fresh in our mind. We spoke about the organization culture, and that's what I also started with. And we spoke about the 3 foundations of the organization culture. One is the purpose, and then of course the holistic values. Now, the challenge which I see, since I've been dealing with so many entrepreneurs for the last so many years, is the inability of theirs to instill a very deep sense of purpose within their teams. At the same time, making them aligned to the values which the organization has, or which the owner or the entrepreneur has. So can you throw some light on how do we actually make team members own up the values, or instill the purpose a bit more deeper than what they actually hold on to?
The topic of purpose, I agree, is a little difficult topic, in the sense that it's not very easily transferred. We just can't talk about a purpose to people and they can get sort of aligned to it. It's just not going to happen. It's not the experience. It requires quite an amount of churn. But But the whole thing has got to start with a very clear thought and a thinking and a very clear definition of why the entrepreneur is doing what he is doing.
Hmm.
You see, if the entrepreneur is primarily the entrepreneur is driven by today's transactional world and is stuck with today's action, as you mentioned, whether it is an irate customer or a GST return and all that, he's stuck with those issues. But I think it goes beyond that. What does he really want in life? Why is he getting involved in this business? Why is he facing all these challenges? Is it just to make some money? I'm sure the answer is not. Just to say, yes, I want to make money is not a very satisfactory answer. So in his own mind, is he clear about the purpose? That is the first starting point. If he has the starting point, clarity clear about this purpose, then it requires a dialogue. It requires a churn. We have to raise these questions constantly with the people. Why are we doing all these things? What is it? Are we not doing something bigger? Is there an opportunity for us to contribute something more? Can we not do something more? Can we not take part in this big national development, or with the society there is a problem, or with the customer there is an issue? Can we do something more? Can we make something, make a contribution? I think it requires a churn. It requires an open and an active dialogue, a spirited dialogue with the employees to agree and come to an agreement on the purpose. I think somehow we fail to invest on these things, and these not be purpose-oriented lectures for 3 hours or 2 hours or whatever it is. It could be there in our daily transaction. Whenever there's an opportunity, the owner will talk about it. Now, why are we doing? Okay, let us come and do this. This is going to make this impact. This is going to make the automobile safer, which my component is going in, or it's going to make save the environment, or it's going to reduce pollution, or it's going to save water. Some larger impact. We have to find the connect between our action and the result. We're able to find that and establish it in the mind of people. I believe the purpose will get slowly embedded in our mind. Then as far as the values are concerned, the whole problem is in our thing is our values, we are not very consistent. I have seen this, for example, I've been with the CI quality movement for the last 25 years. And I've seen this issue of quality. We talk about quality, we talk about zero defect and all that. But when push comes to shove, at some point in time, there is something like that, the leader allows certain lapses to be accepted and sent out. That is where, that is the cracking point, you know. It requires a very, very strict disciplined action on the part of the leader to follow the values. The leader has got to be a role model. We cannot come and say, look, we want to be disciplined, we want to keep time, and the leader does not keep time. It is no way you can expect it. You can talk about it, you can shout from the rooftop, but you won't get it happen. So the role model of the leadership and the consistent behavior of the leader is what we believe, one which culture. That is why we are talking again and again, talking about what is my paradigm? What is my own paradigm around people? What is my paradigm of what is my life model? Why am I living my life? Why am I struggling like this? The entrepreneur or the leader must get a clarity on this. Without that clarity, he cannot take it through. Once he has that clarity, I believe it is a question of walking the talk. It is a question of being role modeling, and then it comes in.
Great.
That has been my experience.
And I think the way you shared it in terms of dividing the values into 3 parts, where we talk about the business ethics, we talk about the dharmic values, and we talk about the
Basic human values.
Yes. So I think that itself also would give a lot of clarity to people or entrepreneurs as to from where to drive the values, where to look for values.
Absolutely. That's what we believe. That is why we believe that we brought that out separately in values. We're not talking about values in one basket or in one bucket.
Right.
We would like to see 3 different things, but I think we are fairly high on business ethics. Maybe reasonably good on human values, but not very sort of consistent or not very complete in that. And in dharmic values, I suspect that we are still a long way to go.
Right. Do you suggest, do you recommend that when we talk about entrepreneurs framing and discovering the values, do you suggest that they should be sitting with the top team, or they should be doing it on their own and then sharing it with the team, the purpose and the value side?
I think discussing with the top team and getting a consensus of the values is always a better route. Instead of merely saying that these are my personal values, now you follow it. The ownership is not getting transferred, but if you are able to do that. I remember when I was running VDA, if I go back to my VDA example and my experience, although we were practicing many things in the organization, and I was my own personal value systems evolved and helped me do that. For the first time after about 20 odd years of company's existence, we sat down together with the people and we wrote and we brainstormed and brought out the values and the purpose of the organization. So it's always good, because if you have got the right values, okay, you may have a set of values, you may have some list of about 8, 10, 12, 15 things to do, but you can always then later on through a discussion narrow it down and bring it down to a handful of values which will govern and which will define the organization and take it forward.
Can I just intervene a little bit if you don't mind?
That's what.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, the whole business of culture, I think, is top down. I mean, leaders need to own the culture. They need to ensure that, this is as well as possible defined, and then ensure that it is ingrained into the organization. This happens with, every decision that you take. Every time there is a major challenge that you are facing in the organization, these are the times when the values actually get reflected. And just to add to what Mr. Srinivasan said, I think it was in 86 or whatever it is that we defined, the values, mission, as well as the purpose of the organization. And while it was started on top, we had workshops right across the organization saying that this is only the draft. We got everybody involved to say that, yes, if you have anything more to add, we took in all that, sat once again, and then sort of finalized it. So that gives a lot of, the participation and involvement of the people also makes it so much more, increases the ownership so much more, saying that, hey, I've been a part of it, we have done it, and not something that has come down from top. So that way the ownership and the buying is much more stronger.
Just to add, at that time, VDA had about 300 managerial staff and about 1,000 employees.
Wow. Okay, before I open up the question answer Q&A round to the forum, one question which has been troubling a lot of entrepreneurs from the perspective of the human resource side is, we have now a lot of young people who are more skilled, they're more capable now. And there we have people with us who have been there since donkey's years, and they were there during our tough times. They stood by our side, and we have become what we have become because of their contributions in our life. But when we talk about the skill set side or the approach side towards work, we see them a lot wanting compared to the new crop which is there. But the new crop does not come at the same price as they have their own expectations in terms of the life they want. And now we also want to grow. So the phase which you spoke about, the stability phase is through. Now we want to go into the growth phase or the excellence phase we're talking about. Now, this is where the entrepreneur is stuck, that if we hire somebody from outside, how do we kind of match up the culture? Second is how do we match up the equation of the salary side? So what are your insights, Mr. Srinivasan, on that?
This is a real problem. I agree with what you said. This is not an easy task to handle. And but I believe this problem was not new. Even when we were recruiting people in VDA, let us say in the 80s or 70s even, we always found it difficult to get the top tier talent because their expectations were very high in terms of salary packages and their stability was not assured. So at one point of time, it came to us that we could not attract, VDA at the time was a large company, but even we could not attract people from the IITs and the IIMs and what have you. So what we said was that we will look for people in our neighborhood engineering colleges and colleges around, and we look for people with the right attitude. So we actually recruited people, freshers from attitude, and over the years we trained them and gave them the necessary inputs to groom into that. If I may give an example for you, one of the persons whom we recruited as a tool maker with an ITI training, with a constant engagement and training inputs given to him, retired as the vice president of the company. So it's a question of being able to attract whatever you can, depending on your salary package. I'm still sure there are enough number of people around. Let us not imagine that it's only the top 10% who can deliver, the rest 90% are not adequate. We can always find people with the right attitude and with the right things in maybe our local engineering colleges or local polytechnics or wherever. But we'll have to be rather meticulous in choosing the people with the right attitude. And secondly, coming to the young generation is okay. They need a certain amount of money as a Rotary Company Makan and their comparison with their peers and all that may happen. But if you are able to give them a vision, give them the purpose of the organization, give them a challenge and say, look here, come and help me do this. We have got a great future. And if they're able to find some meaning in what they are going to do, I think there is a great chance that those people will stay with you. Actually, this millennial and the aged people is certainly a gap which is there. And Mukund, you want to add on that because this is your topic.
Actually, there's a big wall between 40 plus and 40 minus. What we call as baby boomers and Gen X, they think and act differently compared to compared to people who are lesser than 40, what we call as the Gen Y and the Gen Z. Now, the basic difference, we've done some kind of study or analysis on this, and we find that the 40 plus, as we call, we were all brought up in a scarcity mentality. We didn't have things. Most of the entrepreneurs and senior managers would fall in that category of vice president. So everything was, we tried to grab everything because there was a shortage of everything those days. So there is still that mentality that, we will not get it and we have to grab. But the youngsters come with everything provided for them by their grandfathers, by their fathers. So they think differently. They are open and they're more knowledgeable than some of the senior people because they are open to the internet. They learn very fast, but they're not as skilled. So that divide has to bridge this gap. They have to find, like Mr. Srinivasan and Udupa also used to say, hire for attitude and train for skills. So if you hire the right attitude of young or middle or senior, you can always bring the skill gap easily. And the youngsters want to do, they want to contribute. Like he said, if you don't contribute to a larger purpose, there's no point. I mean, they also feel pitted off and they fall off and they go away.
The younger, we all, for example, at least in my contemporaries or even for example, people who are about, say, in the 40s or 50s today, they have to put in 10, 15 years of experience before they could rise to a position of responsibility in an organization. Young generation is not willing to wait. They want responsibility day one. So there is an opportunity for you to find opportunity to create some new projects or some special tasks and give it to the young generation people for them to perform and demonstrate. Once they're able to contribute, their acceptance by the so-called senior people with their closed mindsets becomes more because they find them to be useful. So we'll have to actually manage that. We have to make these young people come and give them some challenges and tasks, make them succeed, and make them and sort of embed them or infuse them into the organization structure.
Beautifully said. I think this dilemma is going to be there with us as long as we stay entrepreneurs. That whether we listen to Jim Collins who says getting the right people on board, or whether we listen to Sadhguru who says you get anybody and make him right. So I think this is the dilemma which we will go through. But then your points are so the ability to understand the aspirations of people from where they come from, and if you're able to give them that environment. And so truly said about youngsters, I think they have much more knack in terms of being able to connect with a purpose which you have. And if you're able to make them hang on to the purpose, I think a lot of our challenges will be taken care of.
I think one of the simplest things is not to infuse them into a role of responsibility and comparison with the older generation, but to keep them, maybe they could be directly reporting to the CEO as a special assistant or whatever, and they could deliver projects. I mean, that has been found very useful. Even when I was running an organization efficiently, all my graduate trainees, I used to meet them regularly and talk to them. There is one way of making them free. I always give them special projects, make them succeed, so that the elder generation accepts them. They say, okay, he's also capable. He's not a greenhorn. He doesn't have to put in 10 years before he can take a responsibility. That awareness should be built up.
Right.
Is what I would recommend.
We have one question here. It says, while I understand the challenges faced by the CEO in securing the engagement of his employees, I still do not see a reasonably fail-proof roadmap of how to make this possible. That's the question. And do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, but the question is about the more or less what I talked about, in the sense that it is not something which is very easy. It is for the leader to be very clear and understand what his role is.
I think we have.
It is for the leader to recognize that if he's just chasing a certain amount of, initially it's okay. When you start up, you stabilize, you want to get into a growth phase. Maybe a lot of things happen in an ad hoc manner and things like that. But sooner than later, he has to bring a certain amount of clarity in his dream or his efforts or what he wants, his goals. He must be very, very clear. If they are going to be limited to only business goals and all that, try to get people and keep them engaged and keep them contribute. I believe it's going to become more and more difficult as we go forward. With the young people coming into the organization, they are looking for some meaning. They are looking for some purpose. So the challenge is not just on the business domain, but the clarity and what the entrepreneur wants in his life. If you are clear about that and you get your perspective on people right, and you've got your purpose right, and you've got your values right, and you are willing to abide by that in a very, very disciplined manner, I believe there's a good chance. It is not easy. It is not easy. It is not so easy. We cannot give up our way in which we are used to that. We think that we are entitled to a certain amount of things because we are an entrepreneur, we started a business. I think some of these things will have to be, one has to think through, one has to rethink through these things.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
this very paradigm of, this very paradigm of seeing your business as a vehicle to serve you, from there moving on and seeing your business as a vehicle to serve a larger purpose, which includes your team and which includes your customers and the world and society and planet at large. I think that's the mindset, that's a paradigm which we need to bring into the way we are looking at business as of now. Yes,
Absolutely. Bang on.
yeah, you wanted to say something? He was about to add something.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that, that's the raw material that we've got. Whatever has been there, millennials or Gen Z or whatever it is. Now we have to look at what are the options that we've got. Is there a way we can do without them? It's not possible for us to do without them. So we need to understand that different strokes have different folks.
Right.
I mean, different folks have different strokes, and there are different strokes for the same folks at different times. So Mr. Srinivasan was talking about, when you look at the dharmic dimension of it, there's a lot to do with the empathy and compassion and, concern for people, etc. It is important for the manager or the leader to understand where the person is coming from. One is, of course, we go out and hire people who are interested in doing the type of service that the organization is looking at, and not only looking at ROI and return on investments or whatever it is. So we need to identify that category of people and bring them on board. Once they come on board, I think it is important, and it's a role of the management. There is no choice, according to me, but to ensure that people move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 and level 4, and then we get into the psychic safety phase. It is the responsibility of the leadership to make people understand where they are coming from, and over a period of time influence their thinking. And that influence can happen only with the role model that is possible. If that is not there, if I am working for money, I cannot tell my son saying that, hey, you forget money. That's not possible. Every decision that I take reflects my values and reflects my purpose, and that is where the whole nourishing culture comes in. The leader should take interest in identifying where each of these people are and try and move from one level to another. They say people work for 3 Ps. One is very obvious, the purse. The first P everybody looks at, and which is reasonably true, is, purse. The second thing is people work for people. Now, if I find that, hey, Manish is a great guy, I would like to work for him. Everybody wants to work for an Azim Premji or, Narayan Murthy or whatever it is. So it is important for us to bring in those type of values into the system and make people feel that, yes, this is the type of person that I would want to work for. And the last P is that people work for purpose. Now, if you look at Bhagat Singh, for example, he was not motivated by money. There was a larger purpose that he was fighting for, saying that, hey, we are trying to get the, independence for the nation. And if I have to sacrifice this, it's fine. So I think it's important for the leader to take the people. You can't pay me 50% of what my market salary is and then say that, oh, you got to sacrifice. That's not possible. We also have to be fair. But people understand that if you pay them a fair wage, if you take a fair wage, and if I am giving you a fair wage, your credibility is so much more. There is no dichotomy in my style of living and what I'm prescribing for you. Those are the type of people would like to work for. And over a period of time, they will say that, hey, Manish is, a great guy to work, but he is not motivated by only money. There is something else that is motivating Manish, and that is what they will start perceiving. And that is the value of the purpose that you bring in. It is, nobody is saying that don't work for money, don't work for, everybody wants to be recognized, everybody wants his ego and everything to be satisfied, but it is the role of the leader to sort of take him beyond that and be a role model and make it possible. So it's a collective exercise.
True. And on this people side, because a lot of questions are on the people side only, what leaders can do to create, I think we have already answered to it in a certain extent, what leaders can do to create entrepreneurs within the organization. If you want to throw some light on that, what we can do.
We mentioned in the last slide. Can you put up the last slide? I think it is the sum of these three things with a nourishing culture which really converts the person into an entrepreneur. In the sense, for example, it is also the question of how we are able to communicate the value of what we are doing to the organization. There's a famous story about this, a fellow, a stone cutter, engaged in building, let us say, the Ram Mandir today or a temple today. He can be looked upon as a stone cutter. If he thinks he's a stone cutter and gets his daily wage, that is at one level. The second thing is he says, no, I'm building something, I'm earning a living, I'm supporting my family, so I'm working for some little beyond myself for my whole family and my kith and kin. That is the next level. But if you are able to create a sense in his mind that he is working to build a temple, then the stone cutter operates the saying that, okay, I am part of building this temple. And that gives him an enormous sense of pride and satisfaction, which goes far beyond what money can give. I think that is the sense of purpose we have to create in people, and that comes from the leader. It does not happen overnight. It cannot happen by a diktat. It has got to be ingrained in people. The leader has to practice this, and the other people will have to see and follow. Once you are able to create the purpose in the entrepreneur and give him psychic safety, which is very important. When you are trying out new things, when you want innovation, when you want creativity, there are bound to be failures. But how do we handle failures in the organization? What does a leader do? Does he sort of reprimand people? Does he take away the next opportunity to try out from him? Or does he encourage him to go on and try more? The fear of failure should be removed. The fear of freedom should be instilled. And people then automatically will come out of their shell and rise up to their potential and contribute. Then at that point of time, they take ownership and they really become responsible for outcomes. And they will behave like entrepreneurs within the organization, which we term as entrepreneurship.
I think beautifully put. And I think that's the culture which has to be worked upon. It cannot be an overnight process.
Right.
So it's something which has to be built. And I always have been saying this to entrepreneurs that a very strong culture is a must, because if you bring in any strategy, all your strategies will ride on the culture. If the culture is not very strong, it's weak. Whatever you want to bring in, whatever new initiative you want to bring into the organization, the culture, if it's not supportive, nothing will work in the organization. And that's where entrepreneurs, they need to work on. They think they're too small to build a culture, or they talk about culture and values and purpose. But like you rightly said in your presentation, that we don't have to wait to be big. We don't have to be Tata and Birlas to have values and purpose. I think they had values and purpose. That's why they became Tatas and Birlas.
Exactly. That's what it is. Yeah. Can you share this? Can you see the screen which you are sharing?
Yes.
It's a tree there. There are roots, the trunk, and the crown. The roots are what we're talking about. It's the culture. It is the values. It is the larger purpose. It is the comprehensive vision. These are all internal to the organization. They are the ones which nourish the organization. The trunk you see is the organization itself, which you see in physical form. Whether it's a campus or whether it's the people inside or whatever. And what you see outside is the crown is what we do. It is surveys. We are giving flowers. We are giving fruits. We are giving so many things to the society as a whole. So the purpose is really flourishes when the roots are strong. So we have to build the root system.
And that's a leadership role to build this. If you don't have a leadership paradigm building this, you will not get the result. So it starts with the leader, and it has to percolate down the organization by creating more leaderships within the organization which believe in this impactfulness. It's not just excellence which will lead the organization to self-sustaining or trusted.
All the processes and all we talk about business excellence, the rigor of process is fine up to a point. But if you really look at it and analyze this, the rigor of the process and control takes away innovation, creativity, and freedom. So we'll have to strike a balance. That is why Toyota struggled so hard in employee involvement. Toyota has got one of the most rigid and firm and stable processes. But they work very, very, very strongly on the people side to get them engaged through their quality circles, through their Kaizen programs, and through their various things. And the leadership is involved in that and encourages them to go forward on a continuous basis. I think that is where it's important. The dimension, the role of people and the ability to contribute to the organization, somehow it has not got that importance as what we would like it to be. We believe that it is strategy, it is technology, and it is various other things which you go to get at the results. But without the people, you cannot deliver.
True.
It's just not developing more followers. It is more about developing more leaders. That's where you mentioned about the abundance mentality and the, the concept of psychic safety, where I and Manish believe that this is the right thing for us to do. This is the right purpose for us. And there is no dispute in the manner in which we are achieving the purpose. And that is where the, the synchronization of the values also come in. So if both of us agree, or all of us agree that, hey, this is a great purpose to follow. And the moment you agree that this purpose and these values are aligned with everybody else, automatically what Mr. Srinivasan was talking about psychic safety, I can question a lot of things. I can suggest a lot of things that will come up, and that's where the ownership is coming. You are distributing the ownership not of equity but of purpose. Purpose binds, profound purpose binds profoundly. So people need to understand that and look at their own purpose, saying that, hey, have I defined my purpose properly? Is there a better way of defining my purpose? Is there a larger good that is there in the purpose? What you mentioned about 2% of GDP is fantastic. You're not talking about saying that, how your company can improve, 10% profitability or, 30% profitability, but you're looking at GDP and contributing to the nation. And everybody feels at the end of the day, hey, I've done my bit to contribute. And that is the meaning. And they say that, man's search for meaning is eternal. And if you can provide him that search, that meaning of saying that, yes, this is what I'm really looking for in life, you have a real win-win solution.
Wow. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're bang on. I think if we can all connect our team members to a cause which is bigger than their own small petty causes which they work for, I think that's the greatest source of motivation. Otherwise, people work for their own reasons which they have in mind, whether it be a salary, whether it be a house or a car or whatever they have in mind as their dreams. And once that is taken care of, then the sense of motivation kind of runs out. So if there is a deeper sense, a deeper connect, or a bigger cause which we are chasing, which we are gunning, and I think that's what small and medium scale entrepreneurs have to bring in now, that they have to rise beyond their means or their ways of looking at their business, about their own personal benefits. They have to go into this very thought process that can it be a vehicle through which we can together we can create something bigger. And just want to have a question here on this, that now this is based on people who come into the company, and we are saying that let's make them connect to our values and connect them to a bigger purpose. The small and medium scale entrepreneurs, they struggle in getting the talent on board. So it's not about the best. I think many of them say that, sir, we get the rest. We forget about the best, we get the rest. So are there ways by which we can attract the talent? Or maybe Srihari, since you are from the HR background, maybe you can throw some light onto how we can attract as small and medium scale entrepreneurs the right talent.
You see, I understand the problem, but the sense is that is the way we looked at people. It starts with how we look at people. If we look at the people and say, oh, he can't do it, he is not capable, he is not interested, I think we lose before we take the first step. We must first of all have faith and trust in our own people. I don't believe that even in the so-called rest, there are some people, I bet you there are 10, 15, 20% of the people who really have the potential and the ability to deliver. It is our job, the leadership job, to identify them, encourage them, motivate them, maybe give them a supporting hand, maybe hold their hand, take them through the process, make them do things, make them realize that they can contribute and they can also be successful. I believe it's possible, but of course it requires a tremendous amount of engagement from the part of the leadership. And that is where the ability of the entrepreneur to be able to spend time with his people is very, very important. If you are busy with the external world and we do not have time for the internal people, I think we have an issue there. And that is where we have to go back to your urgent important matrix, and we'll have to come and say what is important and try and see how we are going to address them.
Absolutely. Any pathways which you can say to attract talent? Maybe the campus visits are passe now. Applying ads in the papers, they're also there, but the kind of turnout is less. The kind of people who turn up after all the efforts is minuscule. Is there something which they can focus on? Maybe over a period of time, they attract a sizable pool of talent to choose from. But there should be abundance to choose from. We already have a scarcity that we apply and we give a ad in the paper, or we have our agencies lined up, and we have just a small pool to select from. and then we say, no, Andho mein Kana Raja. So you have to select whatever is there from there. You select something for yourself. So
I think for the small scale entrepreneur, getting advertisements and developing people is absolutely out. I don't think it's possible at all. So we'll have to do that, and then possibly, since you've got a group of people together, we can do something collectively. For example, I know groups of industries here in Bangalore who let us say we want to train skilled operatives. They have recruited a group of people among themselves, and let us say some 5 companies, 10 companies recruiting about 15, 20, 30 people, and put them through a training program. There now the government of India is coming up with what is known as an earn while you learn schemes. The government is supporting that. So they do work for 5 days in your organization, and 1 day they go and learn in a week. There are six days in a week. And so people do the earn and learn program. You train people. You, on the one hand, you get some physical capacity, hands and legs to work in your organization. At the same time, you're training them. And once they have completed the program for 2 years, they are really free to go. But if you want to engage them, you can select the best out of them for your own organization. That is one method of it. If you are talking about graduate trainees, engineers and things like that, a similar cooperative approach can be looked at. Or you will have to sort of individually be able to choose. Like, for example, I know companies in Gujarat, for example, I know companies who are a little larger. They are able to go and talk to identify 1 or 2 engineering colleges with whom they have some sort of a rapport or a connection or an ability to discuss. They select 1 or 2 few people and bring them into their units in the 3rd year, with the pre-final year, and make them work on projects. Give them a task. So for which you must be ready. You must be ready to give them a project and guide them through the project. Once they learn working within a company, and once they're able to do that, you know whether they are good and they know whether they are able to succeed. They develop a certain amount of affiliation with the organization, and once they complete, they can join the organization. There are some companies are trying in Gujarat. There are different models being tried out. We must try and see what is good and possible in Pune.
Great.
I think what is also required is, I come from an HR fraternity, and everybody thinks that, HR is the last option. So what these people have done is, even the colleges had a problem to say that they're not getting adequate HR guys. So what they did was they got a whole lot of HR guys to go and tell the students, go and meet this gentleman. They've gone and met some senior people to really understand what motivates them, what they are doing, and how they've been able to make an impact. So people look at your own company. You've got 200 people. Each of them can be brand ambassadors for you. They know what the company is offering. They know how great the organization is. They know what the purpose of the organization is. We should be able to try and spread that message across. And maybe some of the faculty, some of your existing senior people could be faculties in certain institutions. Try and get a relationship going with them, so that over a period of time, they're able to attract the right type of people. I don't know if it makes sense, but
we'll have to try different things. I don't know what exactly is doing.
Yes.
I run a small company in Parvanu, which is very, very far off from the rest of India. And we recruit only 12th standard and ITIs. And many of them go through 3 or 4 years working on the machines before they become even sales engineers and things like that. And that's what we used to do in VIDIA. So you have to find a formula, but you have to invest in people. There's no ready-made, success route for this. I can give you an example of Cafe Coffee Day. All the plantation workers' children, 20,000 of them, are taken through academy from the 6th standard. They invested in people till they got to 12th, and then put them in the cafes all over India. But then they had a vision around people. So if you want ready-made people to be available, I'm not sure even if you go anywhere in the world, you'll get them.
I think that's going to be difficult.
I don't think it's possible.
Ready-cooked food coming on our table, ready to eat. I don't think that is going to happen. We have to invest in people. We have to put in the effort. We have to do it together. If we do it alone, fine. Otherwise, we can find a group of like-minded industries working jointly together to develop resources. It's possible. We have to think out of the box. We have to find new ways of doing things. But we must be committed, and we must look at the long term. If there is no quick fix solution.
Absolutely. What you are pointing out is we need to go from the transactional side to the transformational side. That's only
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
And people have to be important in that transformation.
Yes, absolutely. I think we are almost through the time, and it was a very powerful and a very insightful time with all of you. And I would say that the kind of feedback we will have, I think participants, all of you listening there, you can just share your insights or maybe your views on what you have felt the last 1.5 hours. So we have Ravi saying it's outstanding. Thank you, Ravi, for your feedback on the session. And we have Kishore saying this is such a dynamic lecture and so relevant. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kishore, for your wonderful sharing, for your kind words. So all of you are listening, you can give some insights, some feedback, so that our guest speakers would come to know the last 1.5 hours. It was a wisdom bonanza. Thank you, Neeraj. So we have a wisdom bonanza from Neeraj. Santosh connects to our day-to-day HR issues. Thank you, Santosh, on that. Lakshmi, it was great guidance we received. Thank you, Lakshmi, on that. And very useful, motivating. Datta Harshal says very powerful, very powerful. Thank you so much for all of your messages. And I think very soon tsunami will come in. Oh, the tsunami has come in. People are typing in there. So it's a great value addition. Indeed, fantastic. Thank you, Mohini. As usual from RS, I think Mohini is a fan of yours, sir.
Mohini, excuse me, sir. Mohini ma'am she's a mother of Samir Kelkar, who once addressed our forum.
Oh, okay. Oh.
She's listening.
From Aurangabad. Wow.
Yes, from Aurangabad. Yeah.
Yes. The deer runner. We call Samir as a man who chases and runs along with deers. Thank you, Mohini ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful feedback. Sandeep, thank you, Sandeep and Prabhu and everybody. Thank you so much. And keep your feedback coming. Let them keep on inspiring us to do some awesome work as we go on. And thank you so much, Mr. Srinivasan. Thank you so much, Mr. Mukund and Mr. Urupa, for sharing your time and giving us this clarity. And I would recommend everybody, please grab a copy of Above and Beyond. And I think all which has been shared is they are wonderful seeds from that particular book. And if you can have those seeds in your mind, you will see the kind of fruits which will come in over a period of time. And that's what I feel and I felt from the sharing which they had. And I think the entire program went on to this entire concept, the culture part, which I started. I never knew that it'll connect so well with what I started with. And I think the kind of sharing which was there, it somewhere cemented what I started with. And when the entire universe conspires to make it happen. And I think this is what this entire presentation was all about. So let's all build up a great culture with the focus on all the P's, the purse. Shri said the purse, the people, and the purpose, right? And in the 4 P's, we can have the planet also there. So let's focus and build our organizations which will create happiness for all around, in all senses. So thank you so much one more time to all of you. And Rajesh, you would like to sum it up and close the meet for today?
So yeah, I have written in one of in our GDP group that if you are missing today, you will be missing a substance. And I think people who have not attended, they have missed something. And I think the whole analogy of doing business is so different. I have gone through that Above and Beyond, and we know many stories where ex-employees, they always curse their past employers, like even Lee Iacocca have blasted Ford, Mr. D.R. Pense have blasted Ratan Tata, Mr. who knows, probably Cyrus Mistry will have some kind of, but in Above and Beyond, there is a series of entrepreneurs who have left media and started their own industries, which is so different. So we talk about leadership is all about creating leaders, but we always think that it is for our inside organization. But Vidya has the distinguishing fact that they have created leaders for rest of the industry, and that's how I think why it is so. It is all reflected from the talk of Mr. Srinivasan, Mr. Udupa, and Mr. Mukund. I think it was. I'm so happy that they came today on this particular forum, and whatever we have heard as IMTA members, I could. That this possibility was created to transfer it to our CF members, and I'm so feeling privileged and honored to have them in today's meeting. So thank you very much, sir, for Mr. Srinivasan and Mr. Udupa and Mr. Mukund for being here. We will be certainly in touch with each other, of course, and It would be a pleasure to talk to you always, and it will be pleasure to talk in future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and thanks very much for the feedback.
Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.